G7 nations want to counter China by creating their own Belt and Road Initiative. But do the US and its allies see eye to eye? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Last week, U.S. President Joe Biden and leaders from the world's other biggest economies hung out at the latest G7 summit held in the UK. And if they were anything like me, hanging out with people in person for the first time in over a year, they had no idea what to do with their hands while they were talking. That's why I keep these bad boys off camera. Leaders from the European Union, Australia, South Africa, and South Korea also joined. So did India's Prime Minister, though he could only join through a video link, presumably not using Zoom, since India banned it because China might be eavesdropping. But just to play it safe, the British cut off all internet and Wi-Fi links around the room where the leaders met. This way, China wouldn't be able to eavesdrop, and also, Biden wouldn't be able to make everyone listen to Baby Shark for the 40th time. This extra level of security was because the G7 met to address the big 3 C's: coronavirus, climate change, and China. It's the last C that's really setting the tone for this year's G7. That's because China is being a real C word: contentious. And China is not a fan of the G7, according to Chinese state-run media. To address all the 3 C's, the US and its allies have agreed on a new plan to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. That's China's trillion-dollar infrastructure plan. More than 100 countries have signed agreements with China since 2013 to cooperate on projects like railways, ports, and highways. And hopefully, not bridges. Seriously. No wonder China is so contentious. They're obviously not afraid of burning bridges. According to some analysts, China's Belt and Road Initiative is linked to more than 2,600 projects, supposedly valued at $3.7 trillion. Although less than a quarter of those projects have been completed. This gives the Chinese Communist Party enormous international power, because so many countries are in debt to them. It's not just about money either. It gives China political and military leverage too. And until now, the West had failed to offer a positive alternative to the lack of transparency, poor environmental and labor standards, and coercive approach of the Chinese government. Besides Amazon, that is. Yeah, it's just as shady, but hey, at least you get same-day delivery. But now, the G7 has launched the Build Back Better World Initiative. They call it B3W, which sounds like a mediocre K-pop band. I think these guys are going to need a little more plastic surgery before their world tour. Except, of course, for the 2 most handsome world leaders, Justin Trudeau and Boris Johnson. According to a U.S. official, the B3W won't just be an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. It'll beat it by offering a higher quality choice. By being a poor man's BTS? Come on, man, that's malarkey. But the G7 says that unlike the Belt and Road, B3W is a values-driven infrastructure partnership. Yeah, values-driven. You see, the G7 and other like-minded partners coordinate in mobilizing private sector capital in 4 areas of focus: climate, health and health security, digital technology, and gender equity and equality. Gender equity and equality, yeah. Those will be excellent selling points for the West to win over Belt and Road countries like Somalia. Because if there's one thing they love, it's having foreign values pushed on them. In theory, the B3W will focus on improving the infrastructure for low and middle income countries across the world, especially in Africa. It also emphasizes the environment, anti-corruption efforts, the free flow of information, and financing terms that would allow developing countries to avoid taking on excessive debt. I wish I had someone like that looking out for me when I was taking out my student loans. It's the complete opposite to China's Belt and Road, which isn't very transparent or environmentally friendly, and definitely not free from corruption, which is why so many Belt and Road countries are authoritarian, because brutal world leaders that pay together stay together. But can the B3W truly rival the Belt and Road? Not if political divisions in the West have anything to say about it. More after the break. Welcome back. So the B3W plan to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative is a big deal. But this isn't the first attempt to do something like it. And past attempts have never really gone that well. In 2019, the Trump administration announced something similar called the Blue Dot Network. The Blue Dot Network was announced with Japan and Australia at the Indo-Pacific Business Forum in Bangkok. And like so many Trump-era policies, this is something the Biden administration is continuing. According to the State Department, the Blue Dot Network aims to promote quality infrastructure investment that is open and inclusive, transparent, economically viable, financially, environmentally, and socially sustainable. It brings together governments, the private sector, and civil society under shared standards for global infrastructure development, with the aim of attracting private capital to infrastructure projects in developing and emerging economies. It has the same goals as the B3W, except it doesn't provide direct funding, which is probably why Biden is keeping it. A massive infrastructure plan that we have no idea how to pay for? Now you're speaking my language. Instead of direct funding, the Blue Dot Network will certify infrastructure projects that demonstrate and uphold global infrastructure principles. As one U.S. official put it, it's like getting a Michelin star rating for your restaurant. China's bridges? 0 stars. This certification system, according to some experts, could give investors confidence to invest in infrastructure. But the problem is, the reason why the Blue Dot Network is focusing on certification instead of direct funding is because the US, Japan, and Australia cannot possibly match China's Belt and Road Initiative dollar for dollar. A totalitarian state can marshal resources in a way countries that give people a choice can't. The US could try starting a GoFundMe for this, but how could we compete with this 100% real campaign to rescue Matt Damon from Mars? Hurry up! He doesn't have much more time. A senior defense analyst at the RAND Corporation pointed out that the Blue Dot Network falls far short of effectively competing against China. It may come across as not only unimpressive, but even petty. Hey, when it comes to being petty towards China, that's this guy's job. Stay in your lane, G7. And believe me, this isn't the West's first rodeo. Western countries are great at talking about values-driven blah, 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 but China is the one coughing up the cash. There have been lots of talk about providing quality infrastructure to developing countries and pushing democratic values. They said it at the 2018 G7 summit, and the 2019 G20 summit, and the 2020 Zoom G7 summit. They kind of say the same thing over and over. But surely this time will be different. You see, this time, the G7 will commit to jointly mobilizing $100 billion a year for the B3W to help narrow the $40 trillion infrastructure need in the developing world, which, for those of us who can do math, means it will only take 400 years to meet the needs of the developing world. It's like giving sunscreen to someone who's on fire. Thanks, but also, why? So how are the G7 nations going to jointly raise that money when, let's face it, they barely get along? I say they should get Justin Trudeau to start an OnlyFans account. But instead, the US will use an arsenal of development finance tools like these guys and work with international financial institutions to formulate pragmatic, effective, and holistic solutions to support trade and health, as well as their support for open, diversified, secure, and resilient supply chains. As Biden put it in an op-ed, the U.S., with its allies, will focus on ensuring that market democracies, not China or anyone else, write the 21st century rules around trade and technology. So it sounds to me like this isn't going to get funded. Should have gone with my OnlyFans plan. Although the G7 initiative is calling on collaborations with the private sector is traditionally hesitant to get involved in large-scale infrastructure projects. Really? I'm shocked. IHOP isn't gung-ho about financing roads in Tanzania? Guess they're not very international after all. Now, I don't want to rag too much on the G7. They said a lot of good things. They raised concerns about Taiwan, the East and South China Seas, and human rights violations in Xinjiang and Hong Kong. The G7 didn't do that the last time they met. But the Chinese Communist Party is united in undermining the West. The West is not united in countering China. Biden has definitely been pushing the G7 countries to get tougher on China, which is yet another Trump move. Wait a minute. Is that you under there, Donald? But while everybody agrees China's intentions and actions aren't benevolent, there is sharp disagreement about how to respond to China's rising power. There's still fear about taking too tough of a stance against China. I'll explain more after the break. Welcome back. According to a U.S. official, there's a spectrum of how far different countries are willing to go to criticize China. And that spectrum looks something like this. Two senior Biden administration officials said that Canada, the UK, and France have largely endorsed Biden's stance against China. But Germany, Italy, and the European Union are more hesitant. Japan is a bit of a fence-sitter too. Germany, Italy, and the European Union were clearly concerned about risking their huge trade and investment deals with Beijing or accelerating the tones of a new Cold War. You see, Chinese business deals are like Chinese food. Once you've had some, you're gonna want more 30 minutes later. The Italian Prime Minister was among the G7 leaders who urged Joe Biden not to push competition with China to the extent that it prevents cooperation on other vital issues such as the climate crisis. That's because China is the biggest contributor to the world getting all hot and bothered. After J. True. And BJ. Italy's response isn't a surprise. Italy was the first G7 member to sign up for the Belt and Road in 2019. Since then, Italy has signed nearly 24 deals with Beijing, ranging from tax regulations to sanitary requirements on pork exports. Makes sense. If Italians are known for anything, it's trying to get all the coin they can. But since COVID, Italy seems to be slowly pivoting away from China. It vetoed a 5G deal between Huawei and one of its telecommunication companies. And it's expanding business protections against China. So let that be a lesson. If you unleash a virus that ravages the global economy and kills millions, then Italy might think twice about working with you. They're still fine with the human rights abuses, though, so knock yourself out with those. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel wants to maintain good strategic relations with China. There's a lot at stake for increased market access. China, for example, buys a lot of cars from Germany. Merkel pushed for an EU-China investment deal despite criticisms about human rights abuses. Then again, Germany's probably the last country that should criticize others over their human rights abuses. But Merkel's definitely being pressured to be more vocal against China. Probably helps that her people are feeling spicy from the Chinese foreign minister's sick burn last month, where he told Germans, "You know what genocide looks like." Dang. China burned Germany harder than Germany used to burn. Nope, too dark. Moving on. The good news is, China's horrible human rights record is making European countries wary. And China's revenge sanctions against the EU convinced the EU to halt the upcoming EU-China deal, which would have cemented Beijing's status as a trusted trading partner. But the question is, will everybody get their act together and define a coherent China strategy? And can the B3W match China's much larger Belt and Road Initiative? Germany's former ambassador to the U.S. says the U.S.'s interests are not well served if there's a German-China strategy, a French-China strategy, and a British-China strategy. So once again, the question is, Biden talks about working with U.S. allies to counter China. But do U.S. allies really want to counter China? Right now, Biden's got to be asking himself, what would Trump do? Let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. And please support America Uncovered by going to the crowdfunding website patreon.com/America Uncovered. We rely on your contributions. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.